Good morning. My last name is Jani, which is easier to pronounce, so I'm starting with that. First name is Vibhavari. People call me Vibha, so please feel free to call me that. I am with Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas, in the United States, and I had the privilege to work with our university museum called Mariana Crystal Beach Museum. This project that I'm presenting is actually not my work. It is our students' work. It's a multidisciplinary collaboration between varieties of different departments at the university with the museum to create a gala event for raising funds for the university museum. So the project is called Spiritual Wonder, and this project was really designed for a one-night event. And so that is temporal installation within the museum gardens. And we had to work with varieties of different constituents of the university and the museum's friends of the museum committee to create this event to help university raise the funds for the museum's new project. The museum was actually having a project called Museum of Wonder that they had already installed, and we wanted to create a lot of buzz for this project and also raise funds for the new project that was coming in called Library of Wonder. So in doing so, we had varieties of project goals. This being an academic environment, we had to really provide academic experience to our students. We wanted them to actually be involved in a community service project, so service learning pedagogy had to be introduced to it. First and foremost, money is always very important for the university, especially because these kinds of projects are now very, very difficult to do in the United States with the funding dwindling. And we wanted to create a memorable and engaging experience for our patrons and really involve students in philanthropic endeavors. So when we started doing this project, first and foremost, we had varieties of limitations, and I'll talk about challenges a little later, but this is the site. We have a museum that is quite large compared to any university museums. It has a very nice collection, but this particular project, Museum of Wonder, was designed to really highlight all the different collections from varieties of different colleges of the university. So this was actually based on Cabinet of Curiosity as a concept by the museum director, and so all different departments have sent their collections to the museum. Museum curators had selected some of the objects to display in this Cabinet of Curiosity concept into the museum itself. And our task really was to create this gala event called Night of Wonder and engage inside and outside of the gallery. As you will see, the galleries, like any other museum, are very intrinsic, interior-centric museum galleries. There is no natural light coming besides the clear story buildings, and art is everywhere. And our major challenge was to really connect people from inside to outside, outside to inside, but the garden was downstairs. So if I go back, if you can see, the galleries are up here. Garden is down below, entrance is on the other side, and there is really not much that you can do about that. The galleries are up here, and you can't really see the garden down below. So our project approach was based on evidence-based design, where you really have to collect evidence first to make sure that you understand the project, you have project goals that are based on this evidence, and then you do these different aspects of the design to construct and install the project. We wanted to work in a multidisciplinary collaboration, which was a requirement by the museum and friends of the museum committee, and we had to provide community-based service learning pedagogy. So these are the different departments we had to work with, which was actually always a pleasure. And half of them are departments that I actually teach in. So my particular discipline is architecture and interior architecture and product design. And then we had landscape architecture, music, dance, and varieties of different artists from the art department working with us in consort with curators and museum staff. We also have to really understand what community service and service learning pedagogy is. It's not volunteering because then that it does not provide learning experiences. And we have to give our graduate students learning experiences of designing a museum installation. So keeping that in mind, we also have to understand what are the inspirations. The Museum of Wonder was based on this cabinet of curiosities, which actually then we started researching what it means. And I will particularly read this one, Evans' interpretation of cabinet of curiosity provided really a guiding light for us. It says solace and retreat for contemplation. Now, if you have known cabinet of curiosity as a concept, at the time everything was put together in a big room. There was no classification. There is a reason for it. There was no distinction of categories at the time, which was very important for a university to understand, because now most of the museums are based on categories. So there is a science museum which is particularly of certain kind of science, or there's an art museum, either modern art museum or this museum or Joan Solon museum, things like that. Learning does not happen categorically in that sense. So the university and university museum wanted to really portray how learning happens, not in category. And so that's why this project was actually based on varieties of collections that different departments and architectural environment there was, to create this kind of contemplation area where you can actually reflect and understand what is happening around you. And so concept of this spiritual wonder project was really based on this literature-based reviews that we did, and to understand what this cabinet of curiosity represented at the time. Then we came to know about the Kunsthammer. I am not pronouncing it correctly, but that's a German concept that happened in 17th century. The curiosity, cabinets of curiosity started in 16th century. It at the time was a room, then it turned into the furniture, which really became a cabinet, and then it also turned back into this experience, and how to really understand varieties of these objects put into this particular environment. So the symbolic arrangement of their display, ceremoniously presented to visiting diplomats and magnates to create like a celebratory procession was very, very important. Now, why that was important, I'll talk to you in a bit. But we have to really understand what are the varieties of references given to us by the museum. They had given us varieties of books on cabinets of curiosity that students had to do literature reviews from. We also put them through qualitative research methods, so they had to really understand what informal interviews mean and how to record them. They had to really go on site and observe and document and really talk about varieties of issues that are related to the site. And then they had to understand varieties of different precedents. As you can see, this is the major part of the site that we had to deal with. As you can see, there are the windows, almost like clear story, that you cannot really approach from inside. The only windows that were available to make this inside-outside connection was these 4 windows here and one larger big window there. This is the porch that you actually come up to come out from the gallery itself, and this is this huge ramp that then ends here, and you come back to the garden in the center. Now, museum had not provided an art piece. They wanted us to create an art piece based on varieties of things that were happening inside. So that was another thing. We looked at varieties of these books, and students actually really did written literature reviews based on their understanding of what cabinet of curiosity means. They then visited or reviewed varieties of precedents, including National Sculpture Center, varieties of US-based and European-based museums, to understand this inside-outside connection, where the site-specific sculptures are placed, why are they placed that way, how to connect this interior and exterior environments. And then they studied also varieties of sculptures and sculptors who have played role in developing light, color, texture, tectonics, and site-specific sculptures in larger sense. So they studied James Turrell and his lighting sculptures. They studied Richard Serra and his tectonics and metal sculptures. And then they started working on designing this whole project. So we had a studio larger than this. All four walls I covered with black construction paper, which is what became their drawing board. And as the keynote speaker was talking about creating storyboards, they literally created thousands of sketches for each challenge. So the first challenge was to work in the team. Students are not used to that in larger sense because they are used to working in team for their own discipline, but now they had to listen to other department students and what they were doing. They had also had to base their work on dance and music movements that we were using in that Night of Wonder Gala. And so when they were actually going through these design processes, the dance and music movements were actually projected on the screen so that they had mental reference of what they were designing. We had to also create the seen and unseen part connection with interior and exterior. This is the porch or patio that you can come out of the building. This is your starting point to look down on the garden. So you come out of these gates, and these are varieties of little gallery kind of platforms, which is the ramp that looks down. So then they had to start understanding this path-place relationship, how to create it. First of all, how to move people from inside to outside. And then within this large ramp, we have how to create varieties of engaging and discovering kind of experiences that would actually move them down to the centerpiece in the garden. And so they came up with varieties of these ideas. Gateways and sensorial portals were very, very important to them because they were looking into threshold changes and what does it mean, how do we connect art, what is art, what art can manifest, how does that actually then make you inquire about who you are, what you are doing in this world, this kind of spiritual journey that you could develop using these varieties of symbolic gestures. Does that need to be metaphysical? Does it need to be physical? What could the sensorial portal mean? Then they also have to really work with music and dance students and what these movements that they were actually then using within the interior galleries. So they had to hear this music. They also had to do some of the movements with the dance students to understand what are the shapes, what are the forms, what are the rhythms that they can actually then adapt in designing the outside connections. And so they started sketching and came up with varieties of these portal designs, as you can tell. And then finally realized there's a huge material limitation. We have only $1,000 to create this huge installation. It is only for one night, but it has to provide this engaging journey and experience for the patrons so that they give money to the University Museum. So finally they decided, okay, bamboo is in abundance, so we will use bamboo portals as varieties of these threshold changes. And rather than creating big, huge music installation, we will use strings, piano strings, to tighten the shapes of the arch, to create the gateway, and make that as a musical sensorial portal. And so what they started doing was to really come out and working out these details of what kind of height, what kind of shape, how many portals that they would need. And so they designed these varieties of placements, and then they had to understand what kind of sculpture that they wanted to create in the center to bring them down. They also looked at varieties of elements, and light was very important to them. So then they created these models to understand how big the sculpture needs to be. They decided, because there's 30-foot difference between the first gallery and the garden, they will need to make 16-foot sculpture, which in itself was a huge, huge challenge to make. So these are some of the things that they had to do. Then came the whole big point of presenting to the committee and getting it approved. A lot of debate ensued because everybody had an idea of what this Night of Wonder should be, why this is a spiritual wonder, how you're going to create that, it is going to be at night, how people are going to see it. And so we came to the conclusion that the light, the sculpture, has to be eternal flame, which then symbolically actually describes the knowledge that is displayed within the gallery. And then they started building these portals and doing varieties of these construction. We had to use varieties of different technologies, including CNC routers to create that 16-foot sculpture. And then moving these huge sculptures and portals was another challenge altogether. So we literally had to get 16-bed moving truck from our moving department to move these sculptures. So there were 25 students that actually lifted the sculpture and then tried to put it together on the site there. And so what you see here is just one of the big sculpture installation. And while I try to finish it, I'm going to try to play the installation that happened. So this is this ramp here, music department, and provided the music. The dancers from dance department actually were performing on these different stages which were designed. These were the portals that you see that were bamboo portals that were designed with the musical sensorial instruments hanging within them. If you notice, their movements are actually the indicators of the bamboo shapes and gateway forms. And they actually played music themselves as well. So as you can see, the patrons are going back and forth. The gateway started up on top where the pathway started. So that is the only three connection windows we had, so that there were dancers placed inside as well on white boxes to connect that curiosity to see what is out there for the museum patrons working inside. And then these dancers were moving on the ramps, indicating how to proceed through the procession. And you come down, there were 4 big, huge gongs placed around the Eternal Light sculpture. There was a gong player down there, that the sound also was part of the indicator of what is happening outside. And as you can see, varieties of those portals up on the ramps created the journey. So I'll stop here and let this play and take questions so that I am within my 15 minutes limit.
Thank you. Any questions? What a process, right? Involving, multiple partnerships and students and touching all the elements to create a space of site-based experience in such a limited budget. Amazing.
It is for one day, so it's, we have to be cognizant of it. But we raised $500,000 in one night.
That's a good investment.
That was a great investment for return. And we were also told that the museum attendance increased after that, because students typically don't go to museum, and we are literally 3 minutes from our department. And it was really very surprising to see that our students, architecture students, don't go to art museum. Dance and music students don't go to art museum. And since now there was student involvement, we created a traffic that the museum had never seen.
They're kind of taking the ownership, so they know that's the place they can go. So any other questions?
This was a whole semester project for one night. Yes.
But one semester.
Yes. So typically 16 weeks.
Not too bad. Keep up the entire semester busy. Any other questions?
How many students were involved in the project?
There were 16 from our, and then varieties, 8 dancers, varieties of musicians from music department, and then of course varieties of museum staff who are also students.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for sharing us a wonderful project. Oh, yeah, give her a round of applause.